One of the MMORPGs that I long to return to the heyday of still hasn't really had any kind of contemporary all these years later. Star Wars Galaxies, the MMO that spawned forth from George Lucas's imagination, his frantic mind, and was harnessed by Raph Koster and his excellent team back in 2003 to provide players with a fantastic sandbox to jump into, battle rancors, even tame them, get lost in cantinas, build a home, create a farming empire that takes over a planet, and then abruptly end. Because it was made too fast and they didn't have really an end game or anything. Even those MMOs that we loved as kids, they're not perfect. But there are a few things that bring back fond memories, like playing in a band in a cantina or beating up a rancor with your fists as a Terras Kasi. That brings us to Star's Reach, the sort of spiritual successor to Star Wars Galaxies, being made by Raph Koster, an indie project no longer under the auspices and the funding of Sony, nor the decades of world building of LucasArts, which could potentially be to its detriment. Though at least there's more freedom. Is an MMO I've talked about a few times over the last year or so, but one that had a substantial update recently that I really kind of wanted to talk about because it's made some pretty big strides. Star's Reach is an even more open sandboxy MMO than, say, Star Wars Galaxies in my opinion, and it's an in-development MMO, meaning it is not finished, not even remotely so. And I'd say that it kind of had a younger audience in mind than SWG at the time it launched in 2003, or maybe I've just gotten a lot older. Also, while I'm on the subject of old, welcome to yet another episode of me trying to blend into my surroundings because my odyssey of my home repairs continues. Sorry for the shitty lighting and everything else. Star's Reach is seemingly aiming to be more fun and cartoony than Star Wars Galaxies, and combat is more arcade-oriented, but perhaps the biggest difference is the world's destructibility. Pulling from Dave Georgeson's experiences working on the ill-fated EverQuest landmark, they're working to create a galaxy of planets that you can destroy, reform, and watch grow and decay through an in-depth physics and chemical-based system that hopes to live, grow, and die based on your actions. Or even set things on fire, like people's trees, which I certainly haven't done on accident in this game. But after jumping into several tests, the lead up of this one, while I saw potential, especially for how different it just wasn't there. That was until this most recent test. Something started to click with this newest update for me. The pieces have started to come together a bit more. And while I still have one major concern that we'll talk about a little bit at the end of the video, some praise needs to be heaped on this team for what they've managed. The new update and some of the more recent ones added a lot of things I hadn't experienced before. A new, very brief tutorial, a more fleshed out skill system, missions that give you a goal of something to go and do, though admittedly rudimentary, performance improvements, combat improvements, visual improvements, and more balance, not to mention more building options. In this update, I had the most fun I've had with combat. Something I've been critical of before. It just feels better than in the past. Perhaps they've gotten the enemy tracking a little bit better. The visual effects maybe look a bit better. But beyond that, there's more purpose in how to do it with the addition of missions to the game, as well as more enemy types and different levels of enemies. Combat is fast approaching being worth actually doing, being worth spending a decent amount of time on in this game, which is great to see because earlier in the development, it kind of felt like it was under polished compared to building and harvesting. And to be fair, it still is, it's just a little bit closer. Combat, at least in my opinion, doesn't shine in the game yet, but this does feel like they've taken a meaningful step forward. I think the next meaningful step is going to come from when they actually add in melee combat, because who doesn't want to stab, punch, and bludgeon things, right? I mean, well, probably a lot of people, but honestly, that's I think one of those things where you have to do a lot more thinking on the combat side on how things work. In fact, that comes in with a long-term concern I have about terrain. Because of how the game is built with destructible terrain, I kind of wonder how nightmarish is it going to be to have creatures that can get stuck. Kind of like this one right here. I think this is something that they'll really need to find out how they want to iron things out once they get these melee weapons in, because terrain becomes more important with them. There's a lot more depth to Melee, in my opinion, with stuff like this, and there's a lot fewer places to hide your combat system in Melee versus a sort of a third-person shooter where you kind of just like randomly shooting out in the air. And I know it's not necessarily random, but there's still, you have to kind of hone it in a little bit more. So it makes sense at least to have gone with the range damage first and then go to Melee because it's a bit more involved, especially with uneven terrain quite literally everywhere. With this new update, we also got a tutorial. The tutorial is simple, but it's effective, letting you get a feel for the game and kind of picking a sort of starting point for your class. Something I learned the hard way when picking a starter skill set. I didn't have any way to change the terrain when I was first starting out since I went the combat route, because the aforementioned stabby stabs. Which meant that I quite literally, I got stuck in a damn tunnel someone had built that seemed to go on forever, like forever and ever. Hello? Oh! Hello? Hello? Fuck! Wait, I can't, I'm really stuck here, like I can't get out. Hello? Can someone get me out? Someone help me! Recording that line in this place with my neighbors possibly hearing me was probably not the best idea. I'll update you if they call the cops. At least with these hallways that seem to go on forever, we got to see a little bit of the cool lighting tech they have in the game. Now, one of the most basic things I found important in this update, despite being extremely bare bones, was the addition of missions that give a very necessary goal in the game early on, especially when you first leave that tutorial. They instantly reminded me of the tasks you'd get at mission terminals in Star Wars Galaxies. Yes, it is simple. It is stunningly simple. They're the least interesting version of a quest, but they do add some structure in a game that otherwise has little. It's a little bit of gravity in open space. If you have more gravity, they kind of are boring and annoying, but without it, you need this. I think you need something to give someone guidance in what to do instead of just saying, go. Now, of course, there were still some performance issues as to be expected, a few times where I lagged out fairly badly, for example, but much improved from prior builds. Obviously, this is going to be a continued concern, though, as more people are playing and as more things are being built in the world, or destroyed in the world, more NPCs get laid into the game, etc. Something to watch if it keeps trending in the good direction, or if it reverts. Having this little hub base is a fantastic start for things. The little place where you get the tutorial, it provides a hub to go to where you get your missions and everything. But I'm also hoping in the future updates, we start to see some NPCs populating the world, and not just the killable ones and the tameable ones. I actually should have said that you can tame certain things now in a very rudimentary way, just to make it a little more lively, add in something to the world that exists without you being there. My favorite thing in this game, though, is still just kind of floating around through space and landing on things. The way the dynamics are handled is just really cool. You have momentum, you can do everything in space you do on land, and it just feels a bit different. And the different values of gravity make it really fun when you're somewhere like the little station and can jump really high. This is kind of like the type of movement I think is really great for space and or swimming in an MMO. It's just really done well so far. On the second planet I visited during the test, you got to see a bit of what the building functions are capable of. The meat of the game, I think, at the moment. And what happens when you let players just kind of run wild. This is just kind of incredible. I mean, look at this cute little bear pup otter thingy. They even have a freaking apartment building. I wonder if it's rent controlled. Complete with no elevator and no running water. This 100-foot square foot apartment overlooking the giant leggy robot sculpture runs $2,500 a month, and you must pay for a year in advance. Internet is extra, water is extra, air is extra. Honestly, the game is kind of coming along nicely, and this latest test was a vast improvement from the last time I played. It continues to excite me for the future, even though it's not perfectly fitting what I'd be looking for in an SWG successor. But the bones are there and I can see the vision. Playing Stars Reach, I often feel like I'm a bit adjacent to the target audience, but close enough that I can definitely see myself playing this as a casual MMO for a long time to come if they keep pushing the game forward. But God, I cannot wait to see more customization in your character and especially see the melee at work, because believe it or not, I did not pick this hairstyle. I did mention that I had one big thing that I feel like I need to mention every time I talk about Star's Reach. And that's essentially that I am worried about this game going to Sandbox. I'm worried about this game kind of being PAX Day. I'm worried about it doing something that Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies didn't do, that I think made those games really good. It might be too open and too player focused. Like, I feel like when you're creating a sandbox, it's really important to have the actual box. So that box being like in Star Wars Galaxies, Theed, in Ultima Online, Britannia, or Moonglow. It's a place that players have as a, like, this is always going to be here. It's not player run, it's just an NPC city. You have services, you have things that you need, you have potentially quests, you have an environment to go to, a hub to go to. And I think that having that fleshed out in the game is something that's really important. I think having the hub is a good idea, a good start, although it's a very small thing, and I want to see where they go from here. I know they've talked about, Ravcoster has talked about in the past, that they're going to have some kind of hub, and I want to see what that materializes as before I give up the ghost on this little complaint of mine, because I am still very concerned about having a bunch of sand and no box. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.